Hey everybody, this is Dan from Mechanical Malarkey. Today I'm going to show you how to replace the front pads, rotors, and calipers on a 2002 to 2006 Toyota Camry. These are the tools you'll need. On the stock calipers they have 14 and 17 millimeter bolts and an 8 millimeter bleeder screw, so you'll need wrenches or sockets for those. If you aren't replacing the calipers, you'll need to push the pistons in. An easy way to do that is a large pair of channel lock pliers. You may need a pry bar to help get the caliper off if everything's all frozen up in there. If the rotor is rusted on, you'll need a good hammer. And it's good to have a bungee cord to hang the caliper from the spring. You'll also want disposable gloves, some paper towels or shop rags, some solvent or brake clean. You will need brake grease for the pads and sliders. If you're replacing calipers, you'll need .3 brake fluid. And it can be helpful to have a one-person brake bleeder like this. Before removing the caliper, if you're going to be replacing the caliper, you want to loosen the banjo bolt for the brake hose first, because it's easy to do that while it's still connected to the caliper. So this stock one is a 14 millimeter. Might be different if you have aftermarket calipers already. First thing to do to remove the caliper is to remove the two bolts. They are 14 millimeters on the original ones. If you have aftermarket calipers, they may have a different size. Now remove the caliper body from the bracket. If the caliper is seized or everything's just pretty rusty in there, it might be pretty hard to get off. You might need to use a pry bar. Stick that in there. You can set the brake caliper up on top of the brakes up here. You don't want to just hang it by the hose because that can damage the hose. The other option is to take a bungee cord and hang it from the coil spring so it's out of the way. Now you can remove the pads. If they're stuck really hard, you can use a hammer and a pry bar to push them out. Now to remove the caliper bracket, there are two 17 millimeter bolts. Now with the caliper bracket off, you can remove the rotor. There are no screws or bolts holding it on, but around here where everything's rusty, it's rusted on there pretty well. So, need a good hammer. Again, as things are very rusty in this area, the backing plate is almost completely rusted off, so I'm just going to finish the job, pull this all the way off. If you're not replacing your calipers, you're going to need to push the piston back in. There are a few special tools designed just for that, or if you have a big pair of channel lock pliers like this, just squeeze like this until it's all the way in. But if the boot is torn, then water can get in there, rust everything up, so you either need to rebuild the caliper or put new ones on. If you're reusing the caliper brackets and not replacing them, there are a few service things you need to do before you reuse them. Especially if you live in a rusty area like this, you need to remove the pad holder hardware so you can get in and clean up all the rust that builds up in these areas. Usually we use a die grinder with grinding wheels here. You can also use wire brushes, wire wheels, even maybe sandpaper. Most sets of brake pads come with new holders. It's always a good idea to replace these if you can. And lastly, you'll want to lubricate the slider pins. If they're all covered in rust like these ones, you'll need to clean those off too. I usually use a wire wheel at work. And then put brake grease on them. You need brake grease that is designed for high temperatures, not just any old grease. Now to start putting the new brakes on. Get your new rotor. A lot of times new rotors are coated in some sort of anti-rust coating, so you need to clean that off. So you need some brake clean or other solvent. Spray that on both sides and wipe it off with a rag. And then put the rotor on the hub. Put the caliper bracket on. Then get your new pads and put brake grease on the ends. And put them in the caliper bracket. Then put the caliper back on. I'm replacing calipers, so I have a brand new one here. Now to connect the brake hose to the new caliper. The new caliper came with a new banjo bolt and washers. Not all of them do. You really want new ones of these. So now, bring our caliper down that we have hanging up on the springs. We loosened this bolt earlier, so now we can just take it off. It will start dripping fluid, so be prepared for that. Take the new banjo bolt, stick it through, put the second washer on the other side, and then screw it into the caliper. And then clean off all that brake fluid with solvent. The next step is bleeding the air out. Remove the cap from the brake fluid reservoir and fill it up with .3 brake fluid. The easiest way to bleed brakes by yourself is by using a one-person brake bleeder like this. I have a video on how to make one. Click the link. These calipers have an 8mm bleeder screw, so put the wrench on the bleeder screw and attach the hose to your bleeder. Then open the bleeder screw. A quarter to a half turn is fine. And then pump the brakes several times. When you're done, close the screw. Usually I'll do about 20 pumps per caliper. When you're finished bleeding, clean off any brake fluid in the area. And if your caliper came with bleeder screw rubber covers, put those on to prevent them from getting all rusty inside. And finally, don't forget to refill the brake reservoir. If you know that all the brakes on the car are good, you can fill it up to the full mark. Otherwise, it should be a little bit low because worn brakes lowers the fluid level. On this car, I know the back brakes are good, so I'm going to fill it to the full mark. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel, follow me on social media on Facebook and Instagram, and read the blog at mechanicalmalarkey.com. Thanks for watching.